Okay, so one of the topics I like to talk about is bore size, and how it affects whistle playing characteristics. So I prefer a slightly wider bore on whistles because I like the full, rich sound that it tends to give, as long as it doesn't compromise the second octave too much. If the notes are accessible and everything's in tune and it's not too harsh or piercing at the top, I like to have a stronger, fuller bottom end. Uh, but that's not to say that narrow bore whistles don't have their own special charm. So one of the best demonstrations I think I have on the effective bore size are my Reviol whistles, because for the alto whistles, um, they use a single head, and the one head attaches to bodies from alto A down to low E. So you can see right now I have my alto head on my E body, and I've got my A body right here. So you can see there's a huge difference between the size. So the actual bore isn't isn't any different. It's not changing. The head is fixed. The geometry of the head is fixed. So the only differences in the characteristic is you're getting the shortening of the bore, and obviously replacing placing the holes relative to keep everything in tune. But the fascinating thing to me is that because you keep all that stuff the same, you end up with effectively a very wide bore A, probably the widest bore A that I've ever encountered. And then you have a narrow bore E. And I didn't like the E when I first started playing it, and the second time I played it, it took 3 or 4 or 5 times for me to pick it up before I started to really appreciate it. It's such a soft blower, but it's stable once you figure out how to play it, and as long as it's not clogged. But here's the E. So so like all the Reviols, it's got this nice, rich, complex tone. But on the bottom here, even though it's full and pretty stable, it requires very little tonguing before it kicks into the second octave. So So I love the tone on that. And like I said, I've been playing this one more and more recently, and I'm actually pretty close to ordering a couple more alto heads from Maurice, uh, just so I can swap quicker between the whistles because I like so many of them. So when I take that, you can see that there's a delicacy to it. In addition to the richness of the tone, there's a delicacy, and it just it's got a nice characteristic to it. But it's easier to play. You just don't have to blow it super hard, and it's a I think of the right word for it. It's easy blowing, but it takes a delicate touch. It's not one that you just lean into. It doesn't give you an aggressive tone. Now contrast that with the alto A, and I apologize if I'm not getting these heads on exactly right, tuned exactly to the A. I'm just sort of guessing, but you get the idea. So here's the A, and this is a very wide bore A. If you see, let's see, I was messing with here's my Dante music A, which is similar, or it's much more of a standard bore size for an A whistle, and it fits very comfortably inside the Reviol with room to spare. And the Dante's pretty close to the MK, the Goldie, the Chieftain, Thunderbird A, and just about every other A that I've played. So here's the Reviol A. So you can hear it's got this full, rich bottom end. So you can hear it's got this fullness to it. It's a little bit harsher at the top. The tone overall to me seems more aggressive. It's very strong, and like I said, and again, the tone is generated up here in the head. So all you're changing is just the length of the tube. And it gives it this, like, you have to push it harder when you're here. I'm tonguing that, and it's just staying in the first octave. And it's not like I can't get it into the second octave. It's not that I can't get it into the second octave. It's firmer in the first octave. I just have to push it harder. I have to blow it more aggressively. So when you're looking at different like high D whistles, soprano D whistles, or soprano C or whatever, a lot of times you'll see session bore or narrow bore, and so the narrow bores are the ones that are for the key, for the length. It's got a smaller bore diameter than most than what would be typical. So every maker is trying to balance their whistles in a way that suits what they're looking for when they're creating these, and so everybody has, like, there's if you go too wide, you're going to start having intonation issues, and like the very top notes sometimes won't even sound. Eventually you can go so wide that your whistle won't play through the entire 2-octave range. And then consequently, if you go, but you'll get a huge sound at the bottom end until your whistle doesn't work anymore. But consequently, on the other hand, the narrow bore, if you go too narrow, the top end will get sweeter and sweeter and easier to access, but those bottom notes will start to get really, really, really soft blowing, and eventually it'll get to the point where you can't even sound those bottom notes because you can't blow them softly enough to keep it down there. So there's this range kind of in the middle where it's sort of balanced, and so you can have it balanced more towards the wide end where you get that big full bottom range, but you're sort of taking away a little bit from the top range. And the best makers, I think, manage to balance it to where you still have that big full sound in the first octave, but you still have some sweetness on the top octave. Maybe it's a little bit louder, but you get it louder on the. They can get it to where they've cheated it to where it's louder on the bottom, like a little bit louder on the bottom, but not so harsh at the top. And more intermediate beginnery whistles that I've come across tend to have a bigger jump. There's a bigger difference between those bottom notes and the top notes. You'll have really loud, harsh top notes, and then you'll have like wimpy bottom notes. So that's where like the skill of the maker and the effectiveness of the design really comes in, is when you can get that like big full sound in the first octave without totally killing the playability of the second octave. As far as the Reviol A goes, I feel like the closest whistle out there that's like it is that I've played is the Chieftain Thunderbird whistle, and probably now the Busker. But that whistle had such a wide bore that it's a soprano D. That soprano D had such a wide bore that most other soprano D whistles would just fit right inside it. It played like a low whistle, especially in the first octave, but it was just, it got to that was pushing the edge. If you look at it as a range, and over here you've got wide, like the top range of the wide bore usability scale, and then over here is the like narrowest bore you can get away with. The Chieftain, maybe the Reviol A is like here, and then the Chieftain Alto or Soprano Thunderbird D is like right here. It was about as loud as you could tolerate, but I had difficulty controlling, like making sure it was in tune with itself, and those top notes were just very emphatic. So when you're looking at like a soprano D, so here's the Chieftain Cobre. This one is actually a relatively wide bore soprano D, and this, let's see, for comparison, this is a generation E flat, and the E flat uses the same tubing as the D, and you can see it fits inside. So I would say the Chieftain are like standard bore to maybe even a slightly narrow bore, but they don't, and that's typically what you get. A generation is kind of the classic tin whistle sound, but like, so the Cobre is, I wish I had my generation or one of my other ones with me. I mean, here's that one. Here's the Cobre. So it's got some nice fullness on there. This bore is not anywhere near as wide as what the Chieftain Thunderbird was. So it's still, if we're talking about here, like the Thunderbird is here right at the edge. This one's like, here probably, and then the generation would be, like right here. So kind of in the middle. This is the Walton's Melody. So this is a wide bore that you can, just pick up off the shelf. It was about $7 when I bought it. I don't know if this is a stock. It's maybe one of the stock ones. And that one's a really nice, just off-the-shelf whistle. The only issues that I ever have with it is I feel like the tuning is a little bit weird. I just kind of struggle with it a little bit. The Chieftain, or the Freeman Mellow Dog that Jeremy Freeman makes, is based off the Walton's Melody, and all the tuning issues are gone. I think he says that they tend to be, the bell note tends to be a little bit sharp, or flat. Something probably sharp. But he's basically corrected all the tuning issues, and it's a really nice whistle to play. So if you're looking for something kind of on the intermediate scale, Um, yeah, here's the Dante. The Dante. Let me see how that compares to the Chieftain. Yeah, it looks about the same maybe as the Chieftain Cobre. And this one's not too terribly wide. Like I said, this is about, it'll fit inside with a little bit less. It's a little bit smaller than the Chieftain, because I think the Chieftain, I could fit this one in, and it rattles around a little bit. This is a little bit of a tighter fit. So this one's, you can hear it's a little sweeter at the top. Um, but again, you're talking about different head designs, different geometry and stuff. So there's more things that influence sweetness and like whistle tone and things like that. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to go over some of that and yeah, if you're looking for a louder whistle, basically, if you're looking for a louder whistle, that's why they call, like, wide bores tend to be called session bores, because they have more power. Depending on, so this is my session bore Burke. It's got some nice fullness in the bottom end. Burke is one of the ones I think does a really good job of giving you a little bit extra power in the bottom end that you wouldn't get with one of the cheaper whistles, but still keeping it kind of compressing that dynamic range so that you're still keeping it kind of sweet up on the top end, giving you a really nice balance. So yeah, so when you're looking for volume, you typically want session bore, a wide bore. If you're just looking for like something that plays really sweet and easy, the narrow bore is typically what you're looking for. And those, again, they just won't have quite the punch of the wide bore whistles. And it's just a personal preference. Whatever you tend to like. I enjoy, the longer I play it, the more I just enjoy well-made whistles of both kinds. So this, like I said, this Dante is when you're playing. Here's the Reviol again, the Reviol A. And I like to play that one sometimes when I want like just a lot of power or real, robust, complex tone. And then the Dante has become a big favorite of mine. So again, that one plays more like the E, just a little bit softer to blow, easier to kick into the second octave, but it still has some dynamics that you can play around with, and it's stable. So that's what you're looking for. Is again, you're looking for within that range. You don't want it to be so hard to hit the second octave that you feel like you're just working and trying to hold back the whistle. But you don't want it to be so easy that you can't have some solidity when you're coming down on those low notes. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I know that went a little bit long.